Don Global presents the DG Recruit podcast on everything headhunting and recruitment. Achieve the life and career you envision. What's up, game changers? It's your host, Don, founder of Don Global, the headhunting and career coaching company helping you achieve the life and career you envision. I am so excited to welcome Tom Froggatt, founder of Singular, to the DG Recruit podcast. And for those of you who don't know, which I don't think anyone of you would know other than my direct colleagues, Tom was my first and best manager I've ever had in this business of recruitment. And it has been, you've been such an impact on my life. And part of the reason why I fell in love with this business, you showed me how enjoyable it could be and taught me so many tools. So I am just so happy to finally be able to host you on this podcast to share your wisdom so that you can continue to change lives as you always do. So a nice warm welcome to Tom.
Thank you very much, Dan. It's great to be here.
Well, we've talked about this in the past, but I always actually want to learn more about your personal journey. You're so busy teaching others. You're not a man that often talks about himself too much. So I want to get to know more about your journey in recruitment. Okay. How did you get started? How did you fall into this business?
Well, when I was 6, I decided I wanted to be a recruiter. No, I'm joking. I basically got into recruitment because when I was finishing university, I was just sick of having no money. I was just tired of it. I didn't want to do it anymore. And I had a couple of friends who were like a year older than me, who I played rugby with at university, and they'd got into recruitment. And we still saw them a little bit, and they always seemed to be enjoying it. And more importantly, they always seemed to have quite a lot of cash. So that was kind of the first reason I got into it. And I sort of looked into graduate jobs in recruitment and started applying for them. Didn't really know what I was doing. This was in London in 2006, nearly 20 years ago now. And I applied for a bunch of jobs, went to a load of interviews, not realizing actually that all of the interviews I was going to were for different brands of the same company, which was a company called S3, which is where we worked together. And went to see them, went to see the guys at Real. And the biggest thing was that they were the only ones who, when I went for the second interview, the people I'd seen in the first interview sort of proactively came and said hello to me and things like that. So they seemed to be the ones making an effort. So I started with Real in 2006, and did I really know what it was? I don't know. I don't think I did. I just knew that it was sort of like on the phone and you could make a lot of money and people seemed to like have a good time and there was a lot of young people, and that was kind of my way in, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember you just explaining that so bluntly, and that's what attracted me to the job. You're like, it's a way to make a lot of money. So let's talk a little bit more about that. What do you think is the income potential? Like, how did you see it by the time you kind of understood it?
Yeah.
And obviously, Tom is a Rolex winner. So he has made quite a bit of money in this business. And when you told me that, I was like, you won the Rolex. You're like, well, I'm going to help you get the Rolex too. I was like, oh my God, like, what is this? What's going on? So so tell us more about the income potential. What is the income potential?
Well, I think, there's a lot of variables, right? So it depends on who you work for, what your commission structure is, what market you're in, all that kind of stuff. So, and I think that's really hard to navigate when you're new to the industry. But the sort of classic line was always, and this is in pounds, right? So the classic line was always, it was 100 grand. You could earn 100 grand in your first year.
Right.
I know some people who've done that. Not very many, but I know some people who've done that. I made 55 grand in my first year. So what's that? About $70,000, $75,000.
Well, back then it was worth a lot more. Back then
Back
it
then
was
it was
like
worth, yeah,
100 you get US in
yeah, that's
2007.
also true. And also my base salary was like 17 grand.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so there's a lot of commission. It was like 3 times the salary in commission. Um, but I think those numbers are still doable. I think it's just a case of, I think in your first year, right, it's a lot of it's luck. You have to be good too, and you have to work hard and that kind of thing. But whether you do the deals or not to get the big numbers of commission is kind of as much luck as anything else in the first year. as you get into your second year and your
Yeah.
third year, you should get more consistent with it. But yeah, I think 100 grand's possible if you work really, really, really hard. I think as well, a lot of people, when they first come into the industry, they think they know what working hard means, and they don't really know what working hard means. They know what working hard means at college, but working hard in real life, in the real world, is a different level of working hard. And I think it
Mm.
takes a while for people to understand that.
So
Um,
what do you mean by that? Like, what does working hard mean in the real world versus their expectations?
yeah, I think people think, oh well, and there are exceptions to this, right? I'm generalizing. People think, oh well, I'll do a couple of extra hours in the evening, or I'll start an hour early and finish an hour late, and that I'm going to be working really hard, and I'm going to do that 5 days a week, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, working hard when I joined the industry was you got in at 7 o'clock in the morning, you worked at 10 o'clock at night. I mean, you were here when we were doing those sorts of things, right? Every night, 10, 11 o'clock, when we were setting up the US business, 6 days a week, maybe not quite as long hours, 6 days a week. But like my working
Yeah.
pattern, I was doing really well was 7 to sort of 10 p.m., Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Then
Yeah.
usually Thursday, I'd finish about 8 p.m. and go for a beer. Friday, I used to
Yeah.
finish about 5, but then I'd be back in on Sunday and I'd work 6 hours
Yeah.
on a Sunday, 7 hours on a Sunday. And there were
Yeah.
people who did more than that. Um,
Yeah.
but I think that that is not quite what people perceive when
Right.
they talk about working hard.
Right. Or they'll do it for a week or
Yeah,
like two
yeah, yeah,
weeks. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like when I first started, I was working weekends, both days, like you said, not
yeah.
the whole day. But, when you're young and you don't have any money and you're bored in New York City, there's no better work to do other than work. Like that's the
No,
best
although you were
strategic.
smart, you used to go to the library, didn't you?
Yes.
You used to
I did.
read, which was a
I used
smart
to
thing to
read. That was back before social media ruined my brain.
do.
Um, before Netflix took over my life in 2012.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah. So, how did you decide to um, like continue your career, right?
Mm,
You started seeing some success. There's a lot of people that exit the business,
yeah.
really high exit rate. What has kept you in the business? What has kept you doing this profession?
Yeah, well, I think over the first few years, I loved it. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't just the money. I really loved the job, and I loved the fact that so I found school quite easy, and I found college quite easy, and I sort of was able to do a lot of I was able to get good grades and all that kind of stuff without trying very hard. And this was the first time where I was like fully engaged because it was like, oh, well, just if I do more of this, you're just going to pay me more and you're just going to give me more lunches and trips and watches and cars and stuff. Like, so there's no limit to this. Like, so
Right.
okay, so I'll just do as much as I possibly can. And I just loved it. And I loved selling. I loved closing deals. I loved the
Yeah.
environment. It wasn't for everybody, but I sort of grew out of that environment as I got a bit older. But in the first 6, 7 years I was in it, I absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
and then sort of opportunity was always there. So where we met in New York, that opportunity for me to come out and set up the New York business came 3.5 years into my career, and I was 25.
wow.
So I'd done well as a recruiter, but I hadn't really got a track record as a leader or a manager. But I really wanted to go to New York. I don't know why, but I just was really attracted by New York. And initially, I wasn't going to run that business; someone else was. And then they left about 6 months before we were due to go, and I didn't know if we were
Um,
still going to go. And they were pretty experienced, and I sort of put my hand up and said, "Listen, I know you're probably going to hire someone else, but I'll do it." Um, and after he stopped laughing, my director told me basically to leave his office and he'd get back to me. And I think they must have interviewed everyone they could find and no one wanted the job. So they gave it to me in the end. So that was a big opportunity. And then, the time in New York was brilliant. We built a great team there and we had a lot of fun building that
yeah.
business. And then coming back to the UK, I got into a different industry and was recruiting in a different part and built a bigger team. So there's sort of progression opportunities were always there.
Right. Right.
And then it kind of got to the point where I never really had like that existential moment of maybe I should do something completely different. I thought I sort of looked at it briefly, but then I thought, well, you can progress so quickly in recruitment that you end up getting to a point quite early in your career where it's very, very difficult to move into something else because you're getting paid this much and you're at this level of seniority, and to do that somewhere else would be very, very difficult. So that always kept me engaged. But then, as well, I think as I've got older, um, I've got a lot more satisfaction from developing people and building teams, but also seeing how we can make such a difference to the companies we work with and to the candidates that we work with, and the importance of doing what we do well. You can make a negative difference as well, but if you do what we do well, then I
Yeah,
think it's just a really rewarding career.
for
Um,
sure. For sure.
so yeah, it's just always kept my attention.
Yeah. I like what you said about that last bit. Like
Mm,
you do so much for your candidates and clients. And sometimes when we talk about money and we talk about how much we love it and how much we enjoy making it, I think that people like you and me, we speak that language where obviously you can only make a lot of money in this business if you're very excellent at what you do. And I
hmm.
think a lot of people who aren't good at this job hear this, what we're saying, and go, well, they only like it because of the money. But they
Right.
don't understand that obviously to make the kind of money you and I have made,
Yeah.
you would have to be at a certain level, and that level is very elite. Like that level of performance is not your run of the mill Joe Schmo recruiter. That is a
No.
top level performer. So I think I'd love to, you have been so amazing. And there were a few people in our company that really were able to develop talent. And
Mm.
you really had quite a few top billers
Yeah.
in your years at Real, starting from scratch, right? We didn't have anything. So,
No.
what was your secret sauce from like you were a new manager, right? Like, how did you even do that? New business, new territory, zero clients,
Yeah.
zero knowledge, really just the few months that you worked a couple those nights, right? So like how did this happen? How did you then set up this business? If you know history, Real ended up growing into God knows hundreds of people, huge what you did contributed to the money that allowed that to happen. So
Yeah.
what was the secret? What was your approach?
I mean, I think in the very beginning, we set it up from London, the New York business, Craig and we were working New York hours out of London, and we just worked really, really, really hard. Again, it was just about getting in touch with as many people as we possibly could, having as many conversations as possible, meeting people as much as possible. This is before you really did video meetings, so like that would be for when
Yeah.
we went over there, but. Um, one of the things I remember we did very early on actually that was really powerful was we as a business, we had a lot of agreements with big global companies, but none of those translated to the US. So we'd go and get in touch with companies where we were sort of had, multi-million pound accounts in other parts of the world and say, oh, look, we work with you guys in Europe. And they didn't care. It was completely separate. It didn't get us anywhere. So we had to build everything from scratch. So it was a lot of real hard work, and we set up after probably a few weeks just a whiteboard, and we just called it our small wins board, and we just basically said anything good that happens, write it on the board. So if you like get a set of terms in place with someone, write it on the board. If you have a good conversation with someone influential, write it on the board. And so, we weren't getting lots of jobs, we weren't doing loads of deals, but every day Craig and I were writing things on the board. And that just made those days feel like they were gathering momentum, and gradually they did. And I think, we we found a couple of things. I think the US was more open to people just picking up the phone and trying to make a buck than the UK was. So like the reception we were getting
Interesting.
was much better than we were used to in the UK. Um,
You mean the customers?
the
Like the
customers, yeah,
customers? Because you
yeah,
speak good English. And
yeah.
you sound this is when, a lot of people don't know a lot of Brits.
Yeah, maybe so, maybe so. But they didn't mind us calling them,
Yeah,
whereas in the UK, people
really.
would get upset that we called them.
Really.
So that made it nice, and like Americans are
Yeah.
generally quite nice, and they were nice to speak to, and so like it was quite good fun. Um, And then I think the other thing was just when we got the opportunity, we delivered. We filled the jobs we used to get at the beginning was so hard. Like we wouldn't get the easy stuff because we didn't have any big PSL agreements. We just got the really hard stuff that nobody could fill.
Yeah.
So we just had to absolutely nail it. And luckily, Craig was a really good recruiter. I was a really good recruiter. Like we were able to fill those jobs. But yeah,
Yeah.
early on, it was just hard work. And then when we got out to the US, and we started expanding the team, um, yeah, we had a really good hit rate actually. There was a few people didn't work out, but most of the people that we brought in those early days were really high performers. And I think probably a couple of things contributed to that. I think we were quite inexperienced, Craig and I, in terms of like mentoring people, coaching people, that kind of stuff. But our director, Morgan, was not. He was very experienced, and he was particularly tough as an interviewer. You probably remember. And so that really helped us to pick the right people, first of all. So it meant we
Yeah.
hired really, really great people,
True. Yeah,
who
because
were really driven.
he was looking to axe. He was looking to negate some of these hires for sure. He
Ah,
was tough. He was
yeah. I mean,
he was
if
looking for reasons to push you to get you to say no, and you had to fight
you
to
had
get
to fight,
hired.
and a final interview with Morgan could be like 3 or 4 hours long, and he'd say no 4 out of 5 times, and
Yeah.
it was hard work, but
Yeah.
it meant that we hired great
Oh,
people.
that's
And
so okay, good, because then it's not personal. Because I don't know
no,
if you
no, no.
remember this. Do you remember this on the final presentation? I don't know if you were even there. Because I don't
Mm.
even think I met you until I got the job and you called me on the phone. You're like, "Hey, I'm Tom. I'm your manager. I wasn't here." I don't even think
Okay.
you were not
Yeah, I
there.
don't
So
remember your interview, so maybe so. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you weren't there because I remember you calling me. It was the first time I ever heard your name, and I was like, "Oh, this is my boss." Like I never got to meet you.
Right.
I don't even know if I think maybe we talked for an hour, but so you definitely weren't there. I don't know if I ever told you, but on that final interview, Morgan goes, you have very average grades. These are bad. These are like, ugh, this is like nothing. Like it's like 3.3. Like this is nothing. He's like, these are not good. He was like, this is not good, right? And I was like, oh, and then I got offended. And
Yeah,
I am very scared of authority figures, but somehow that just drove the fight at me. He pushed that
yeah, yeah,
button.
yeah.
And I was like, well, actually, like 3.3 is cum laude here. And it was not so bad considering I barely studied. Like they basically went off and he was like, okay. He was
Yeah.
like, all right.
Well,
He's like,
because the truth is, he didn't care about your grades. And
yeah,
and he used to do this with everybody. Find something that he could pick out on because he just wanted to see how people would respond to being rejected, right? And it's a really good way to interview people, actually.
it,
It's
it
quite
is.
hard to get yourself to do because like it's not a nice thing to do in an interview.
Yeah.
But it's very revealing.
It's
Um,
so revealing. And it was so crazy. He just hit you in a point where you immediately got triggered. And then to your point, the reaction dictated everything, right? Like if you just
yeah,
start
yeah,
spewing, being like, no way. Like if you just, he wanted to see fight, but he
yes,
didn't want to
absolutely.
see insanity. So,
Yes, and we got both ends of that spectrum, I think, in some of those interviews. But yeah, look, we because of that we hired really great people. So that was the first ingredient, and then I think the second part of it was that um, we were really really KPI driven, right? You'll remember this, and some KPIs are used stupidly, but we tried to use them as intelligently as we could. We tried to break down like which are the important KPIs and actually what do they mean and what's the impact of doing them or not doing them. And yeah, if you
mhm,
if you it's not like how many phone calls have you made, what are your call times, that kind of stuff. It was right, but how many good candidates have you sent out this week? Where are you with like how many jobs have got less than three
right,
CVs? It was those sorts of
right.
things that were actually like quality metrics
Totally.
that we used to focus on. But we
Hmm.
were we were ruthless about them, right? And we were also really we had really good structure and really good routine. So like you'll remember this. And every day at 2 o'clock, I used to stand up and say, "What? It's time to do BD," right? To the point
Yeah.
where I used to stand up, and then you guys used to say it before I had a chance to say it because you knew what I was going to say. So there
Yeah.
was real structure, and I think for people coming new into an industry, and a lot of people who it was their first job, that structure really helped.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think it compounds, right? I think, they're in an environment then, those driven people are in an environment with structure, but they're also in an environment with other people who are doing really well, and that success rubs off. I think,
Yeah.
I had another occasion later in my career where we'd hire really driven people, and 6, 8 weeks later, all the spark would have gone out of them because of the environment. Um,
Yeah.
the environment you bring people into is really important. So putting
Yeah.
down the right people is really key.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Hmm.
so yeah, I
So
think those are the things.
on that note, that's a good segue into like, what are your tips for junior recruiters?
Yeah. Um, well, I'm gonna say, what should I say that's not going to make me sound like really old-fashioned? Um,
But the answers usually are age-old
yeah.
wisdom.
Listen, I think if you're new to recruitment and you're just getting your head around how to do the job, the more people you speak to, the better you're going to get at it. And I mean speak to, I don't mean like exchange emails with. Like I know we have to schedule meetings and things like that now, and that's kind of how
Yeah.
things work.
Yeah.
But when I went into my second year in recruitment, so in my first year, we had a top biller league and we had a top rookie league, and I finished third in the top rookie league, and I hated the fact that I'd finished third. Absolutely hated it. And so I said, okay, I'm going to be top biller next year. I remember going into my appraisal and saying to my boss that that was my objective, and that was my only objective, so the only thing I cared about for the year. And he said, okay, so if you come second, will it have been a bad year? And I said, yes. So,
Mm.
that was my only focus. But everyone I was competing against was way more experienced than me, and way better at the job than me at the beginning of my second year. Um, but I figured I didn't have kids, I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, I didn't have any commitments, so I could just do more work than them. And then what gradually happened was not only did I do more volume than them, because I was doing more volume, I caught up with them really quickly in terms of the quality of what I was doing. And so I became as good as them. And then over the year, I got better than them as well. So by the end of the year, I was doing more volume and it was with higher quality. And that was what allowed me to go and be top biller. So I think just go through the repetitions,
Hmm.
whether, if you're a 360 consultant, you're going to have to do it in lots of different types of interactions. If you're a delivery consultant, do as many candidate qualification calls as you possibly can. Even if you're not sure if the candidate's brilliant, call them and just go through the process, get better at it, get better at it. But then also after each call, whether it's a client call, candidate call, whatever it is, just take a few minutes to just think about, well, what went well? What could I have done better in that call? What should I do differently
Yep.
next time?
Yep.
And that, if you did that 5 times a day, 6 times a day, 10 times a day, like you get so much better without even any training. And if you've got
Right.
training on top of that, then that's going to compound it.
Right. Well, I think your wisdom and your tips need to be said because the culture today, which is surprising, is like anti-phone sales. It's
Right.
absolutely insane. It's the biggest missed opportunity for so many people.
Yeah.
That's
Well, it's
I think
interesting.
that's absolutely the answer.
Yeah, and I think because the culture is so anti-sales in general, right? But
Yep.
definitely phone sales,
Hmm.
that actually creates quite a big opportunity. I
Huge
think if you can
opportunity.
become good at it,
Yep.
at our business now, we have 6 engines of growth, 6 things we focus on as like key growth drivers for our business, and being absolutely world class at sales is one of those growth engines. And being great at sales takes a long time and it's a real skill to develop, but it's one of the most powerful skills you can have. So yeah, I think the fact that it's not popular makes it an even bigger opportunity than it ever
It's
has been, I think.
it's wonderful for those people that are calling and who are somewhat good at it.
Yeah.
It's like crazy, Tom. Sometimes I do get cold calls, largely about all sorts of stuff, and I have only gotten one decent cold call in like the last 6, 7 years, like ever, really. I
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
so many cold calls are terrible. They're just bad.
Oh,
And
and
it's just like,
please
I can't believe
don't
they're
do that
doing
thing.
this.
don't do that thing where you go, oh, you're gonna hate me. This is a cold call. Can I have 30 seconds?
Oh,
Please don't do that.
oh,
Please
I'm so
don't.
sorry to take up your time. Or it's just like the overconfident, cocky salesperson who's like, "Hi, I'm gonna do this for you. You don't want to hear
Mm,
it." And like one time I just like muted myself and just to listen, like what would they say?
right.
And they started singing. They were like, "Oh, are you on the call? Are you not? I don't know if you're on the call." And like this guy's wasting his phone times. He's just trying to hit his KPIs, right? Like that's just so absurd use of your time. Like, why are you even calling if you're
Yeah.
gonna suck so bad at it? Um,
Yeah, and I think the thing is like you've gotta almost immunize yourself against the rejection, right? So you've got to do it over and over again, and like you just stop caring after a
yeah,
while, and then that
yeah,
is again put you in a different league because it doesn't mean that you won't
yeah,
won't don't stop caring in terms of don't do it well. But like
right,
if you stop caring about the rejection, then you can really focus on, well, how can I help this person?
right,
Because that's all
yeah,
sales is really about. It's about finding people who have a problem you can solve. And
yeah,
you're gonna have to talk to a lot of people to find those people who've got a problem you can solve.
yeah,
Um, but it's the fear of, well, what are they gonna say that stops
mhm,
people from doing it.
right.
Um,
Yep. It clouds their judgment. It
yeah,
clouds like what they need to say because they're so worried. They're like, so sorry. Oh my gosh. Like,
yeah.
it's like that's not the point of your call, is it? Like your apology. Like,
No.
so yeah.
My dad said something to me when I first started in recruitment, actually. So my dad was a financial advisor, but like had worked in sales environments where
Yeah.
he'd had to do that.
Yeah.
Um, and he said the main thing you've always got to remember is however someone reacts to you when you call them, it's not about you. You just don't know what's happening in their life. Like their wife might have run off with the next door neighbor that morning. It is not about you. And I always remembered that whenever I
Right.
got rough call.
Right. So true. So true.
Mm.
Because you're just an outlet for them, right? Why
Yeah,
are you
you're just
calling
the
me?
guy who happened
Mm.
to
To be there,
interrupt
punching.
them when they were upset. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they just totaled their car.
Yeah,
Imagine calling
exactly.
on that day.
I called a
So,
guy once who was the CEO of a pharma company on the day that he was trying to close a $40 billion merger. That call didn't go so well.
oh my God. Did you end up doing business with them later, next time?
Not with him. With the company, we
With
did
the
actually.
company?
I never managed to get hold of him again.
The one day I thought you were my advisor. I thought you were my lawyer. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
so what about for senior recruiters?
Mm,
Being that you've been in the industry and you've seen it all from a employee perspective, from a manager, from a division leader, for multiple agencies at
yeah.
your own agency now, for senior folks, what do you really want to share with them? And that could be its own podcast, but just like a couple ideas or some things that you really wish you would have known maybe year 5, year 6.
Yeah. I think if you're at that point in your career, I think it's really important. So like at that point, you know how to do the job, and you've probably done it reasonably well if you're still in it, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you've not been the top performer, but you've probably done pretty well. And I think at that point, it's really, really important to kind of reflect on what you want out of the next 5, 10, whatever, however many years is in front of you, because you can kind of once you've got the basic skills, you can kind of take this career in whichever direction you want. Um, the sort of traditional thing is, especially if you've joined the bigger company, is to just take on more and more management responsibility. And that's okay. Like if you enjoy doing that and that's a route you want to go down, uh, then you should pursue that. But then like really invest in becoming a really great manager, a really great leader. Invest in like your business knowledge and your business experience because that'll help you to progress your career, but it'll also help you to help your clients more effectively. Um, but then equally, like at that point, if you decided that you just wanted to move into a lifestyle business and either work for someone else or set up a business where you did a couple of placements a month and you'd make a good living out of that, and depending on your market, it might be more than that, it might be less than that, but then that's valid too. And I think then it's about providing just a really great service to a really small number of clients and figuring out how to do that. But I think, or you might want to start an agency and scale it and grow it and see what you can do yourself. I'd maybe say for the latter, make sure you're ready to do it, because it's a lot harder than people think, especially right now. Like, the market's pretty difficult right now as we record this, and there's a lot of other things to think about as soon as you go and start building a business that you're going to try and scale. But yeah, I think deciding what you want is really important, and then just figuring out, well, how do I become better at everything that I do around this? So if what you want is to work in a company and just be a really great recruiter, well, learn how to be a great salesperson. Again, expand your business knowledge. Learn how to market properly. Learn about personal brand. Like, continually develop your skills. I see a lot of people who get to that point of 4 or 5 years in their career, and then in terms of their skills and capability, that's where they stay. They stay in the same place, and they do okay, but they never really progress, and it's always a bit stagnant. And I think investing in yourself at that point is really, really important.
Especially now with all these tools.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think, the pace of change over the last 18 months has been phenomenal. I mean, we're only 2 years since ChatGPT was released, right? So like, you
Yeah.
think about how much that's progressed,
Yep.
and it's only
Yep.
going to get faster.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching an interview with Sam Altman recently where he said, I think he did it just before Christmas, and he said, in some ways, things are not going to change to the extent that people think they are, but in other ways, they're going to change beyond what we can even imagine. And so, one of the things that's going to happen is how people interact with their jobs will change, how the types of jobs people will do will change, and the way that you go about your own job will change. And I think, being ahead of that and using those technologies is really key. I think, AI is either gonna kill a load of businesses, and then it's gonna make a load of other businesses really successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I
What
think
about
being on the right
its
side of it.
impact on recruitment as an
Yeah,
industry? You're saying like in the businesses and recruitment, like some businesses in recruitment will really succeed with it.
yeah,
Some businesses in recruitment will just miss that boat, just don't know how
yeah,
to use it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, we've seen an example in our business, and this wasn't all because of technology, but technology had a big impact. So in our delivery team, in Q4 2023, we were averaging across the quarter 3 placements per head. So that was like our average delivery. Now the team was relatively junior, so they got better as the year went on. Q4 24, we're at 7.5 placements per head.
Wow.
And one of the reasons for that is we changed our ATS system to something that was more AI enabled, and we did loads of sales training. But we
Mm-hmm.
also invested in ChatGPT licenses for everybody, encouraged people to use them,
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
so, I think the level of productivity is going to continue to increase if you
Mm-hmm.
use those technologies. And so as a recruiter, you get more valuable as you learn how to use those technologies to enable you to have more conversations.
Yep.
Because I don't think that bit of it's going to go anytime soon. I think it might do
No,
eventually.
really,
Um,
conversations like cold
yeah,
calling.
I think I think it'll be reduced at least, right? So I think
Mm.
um, a lot of the qualification will be removed, and it'll be more about selling and testing people and getting to know people and all that kind of stuff.
Right, right, right.
Um,
But I don't think that that's what we're doing. You're already qualified, right? By the time you already know if you're a
yeah,
good
yeah,
recruiter, yeah, you don't have to ask them. You just see that's the gold
yeah,
candidate. We know that.
yeah.
So,
That's
but you're still going to have that conversation. But you're saying like in terms of just the volume of like qualification, just because you have the
the,
tools, it's much
the amount
easier.
of sourcing you'll have to do will decrease, all that kind
Right.
of stuff, right?
Yeah. Which is great
Um,
because that's the boring stuff. That's the stuff nobody wants to do.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but one of the things you're already seeing is like on LinkedIn, for example, like content's becoming very generic, right? Because people are just using ChatGPT to create
Yeah.
content. what the opportunity is in that is to actually connect with people properly, to build a proper personal brand, to put your own personality on things, whether
Right.
that's on video or written or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so I think, more and more recruiters, the successful recruiters will be the people who genuinely put themselves in the middle of their community, and focus on, well, how do they provide value? How are they useful to people? So to
Yep.
companies, it's not just going to be about finding candidates. It's going to be about how do you attract people? How do you write a job description that people are going to be interested in? How do you decide who to hire in the first place? Like
Right.
upskilling on all those things around recruitment is going to be really, really important. Whereas
Right.
for
Right.
candidates, there's going to be more of this sort of career advisor type stuff that you're going to have to start doing. But
Yeah.
the good news is you're going to have more time to do all that stuff because we're going to
Mm.
remove a lot of the routine things. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we've just launched membership service for people who are looking for a job, to help them find jobs more effectively because the market's challenging right now.
Yep.
We do a lot of work with our clients on employer branding and hiring process and a whole bunch of
Yep.
different things. So I think
Mm-hmm.
becoming that talent acquisition expert rather than just that recruiter is going to
Right.
be important because
Mm-hmm.
if you just do the transactional bit, there's going to be loads of
Right.
people who can do it as well or better than you, because the other thing that AI will do is it'll raise the floor of, like, it'll raise the standard of how everything's done. So you're gonna have to go further to stand out.
Right. Right. Actually, that leads to my last question, which is
Mhm.
around Singular, right? Like
Yeah.
you've set up Singular. What do you think makes Singular a unique recruitment business? What's sort of your approach with your
Yeah.
own agency? And obviously, people are going to glean a lot of insights and hopefully advice and takeaways from everything you've shared today.
Yeah, well, we're 6 years in now at Singular, and I don't actually think of us as a recruitment business anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
recruitment and search is probably about 60% of what we do today. It was everything we do. But essentially, we've transitioned our business to help biotech companies to develop brilliant cultures. So a big part of that is recruitment. You getting the right people into your business is a major, major element of how you build a great culture. But we do now a lot of training and development. We do a lot of work with people around how they build values and non-negotiables for their organization, how they bring through leaders, how they manage performance, how they build like communication feedback loops with their teams, a whole range of different things. And then talent acquisition as a whole rather than just recruitment. So um, that's what really differentiates us is we are not just entirely focused on the biotech industry, but also within the biotech industry. I believe we're the only company who has a holistic framework to develop culture in organizations that allows
Mm.
companies to be successful. And where we differentiate ourselves in that is that we're not an HR company. We don't provide HR support. We have partners who can, but that's not really what we do. Uh, we are able to do everything from a company for a company from helping them develop their mission to how do you train your leaders, but it's all around how do you build a culture that delivers your strategic objectives. It's not about being nice or happy or those sorts of things. It's about being effective and high performance, and so that's what makes us
Yeah.
different, I think.
I love to hear that. And I think that's the way the business should be in the future because recruitment, even before when you were doing it more like regular 1.0,
Mm.
it was a lot more than that, right? You could do
Yeah,
compensation analysis. There
yeah.
were so many things that we were not being paid for that like we were doing. And it was like unbelievable opportunity to unlock because you're a niche market expert. It's like, what a
Mhm.
waste to limit yourself to just recruiting. Like you could literally walk into a company and say, this is what you're doing wrong. That's making everyone leave. Right. And like, let me tell you how to fix it. Right.
Yeah.
This is what your competitors are doing. And recruiters have that insight like nobody else does, but we're not. So many people don't even think about tapping
No.
into the consulting end of this
No, and I
job.
think I think you're absolutely right. I think recruiters see more companies than probably most other people, and that in itself is really powerful. I
Yeah.
know when we started doing culture work, um, I remember having a little bit of imposter syndrome about it because I went to a meeting with a company, with the CEO of a company who just raised like $100 million or something, a decent amount. And I was going in going, that surely they know all this stuff, right? This is a successful company. These are experienced people. Like they know all the stuff I'm going to tell them. They really didn't. And so, if you can develop expertise in a particular thing, whatever that thing is, the likelihood is you're going to know more about it than anybody else will, even if they're very accomplished and very experienced and all that kind of thing. And so, there's lots of ways you can add more value if you just think about the things that others might find useful.
I can't agree more with that statement. So thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge about the business, sales, career advice, business advice, client services advice, and just the insights on AI and technology. So thank you so much for your time. How can people reach you if they're interested to follow up?
Yeah, well, if you open LinkedIn, you'll probably see my face. But
Yes.
but you can find me on there. Or they can get in touch on Tom at singular-biotech.com.
Easy enough. All right. Well, thank you again and wish you and Singular the utmost success in 2025.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.